Hey, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our second installment of the small business series for our marketing and marketing strategies. We have today, we have Joe Melnick here, who is coming in from the board of the Marketing and Sales Executives of Detroit. Thank you so much, Joe, for agreeing to be a speaker presenter today. If you can just give us a quick intro and we can go ahead and get started, unless anybody has anything they'd like to ask before we start.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Dina said, my name is Joe Melnick. I currently serve as Director of Client Development for the Dickinson Wright Law Firm, based in downtown Detroit. We're about almost 500 lawyers across the United States. And so this whole idea of big law and professional services marketing has been a focus for a less number of years for me, probably over the past 25 years. But prior to that, I had also been in consumer products marketing, of all things the beer business. And so I have fairly extensive experience in the beer business, although I got out of it before the craft beer trend hit. So I missed my window where I was going to get rich on it. So instead, I worked for a small regional brewer in New Orleans, and then with the big boys with Anheuser-Busch in St. Louis. So I've seen a lot of different aspects of marketing from both product side and professional services, and I'm hoping to at least give you some overview and an outline of ways to think about it as we go forward. I encourage, if there's questions, what do we have them type it in? I believe in the chat would probably be the quickest way to do it, and we can do a rolling discussion as we go. I'm trying to keep this somewhat informal, but I want to keep it moving in respect of everyone's time. So now, do I hit share screen? Is that the plan? Okay. And I'll hit this and then hit this. Where's the? No, that's not the right one. No, almost. Why am I not seeing it? Oh, there's slideshow. There we go. All right, so our program today is focusing on creating and developing a strategic marketing plan, and I purposely use the word strategic because what we're trying to do here is look at various ways on how to approach marketing for your business or for your division, your company, whatever group you want to call it, and you're going to be dealing with, and it's more than just the different tactics that we're going to talk about. Really, what I'm going to set the stage with is really taking a strategic look at what your business is about and why a strategic look is important to set that builds the foundation, and then you can build from there. Then you can go from there. So, overview of what we're going to cover today is the first is that your strategic marketing plan really is an outgrowth of your overall business plan and strategy for what you're working on. And that sounds pretty self-evident, except it's pretty amazing how often you suddenly find people that are doing the marketing plans for an organization without the context of what the full business plan is. And I'm not sure why that happens, and people think of it almost as a standalone thing. And so what we really want to do is make sure you focus on the overall business plan, including all aspects that are not necessarily directly related to marketing, although most of it eventually does come back to that. So they work together. So obviously a comprehensive strategic marketing plan is driven by the mission, vision, and objectives of your business plan. So as you pull that all together, those things all fit into how a marketing plan should be developed. And it's important to keep that all together. Sometimes again, it's put together, a marketing plan might be put together almost in a vacuum, and you really want to include the full comprehensive look at your company. Also, part of what we're going to be doing today is talking about why it's important to identify your target markets and how to reach them. We're going to be talking about defining your value proposition, and all this in the context of improving the efficiency and profitability of your operations, which you may say, well, that doesn't sound a lot like marketing, but that they really all tie together and they're all part of a continuum, and that's important to keep that in mind. All right, so the components that we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to do is touch on each of these areas, and then we're going to, at the end, I'm going to go kind of run through a list of various strategies and a checklist that's going to be available after the presentation that we sent out. We're going to send a copy of this as well, so you'll have that as a reference guide, and we'll go from there. So obviously, the first piece is defining your business or service, to identifying your target customers, as we've said. It's defining your unique selling proposition and competitive analysis. And a lot of times that's really looked on as creating your value proposition. What is it that you have that's different than your competitors, that's unique to you? And why is it that your target customers or target clients are going to say, they're going to make the decision to utilize you for what their needs are. We're also going to talk a little bit about the pricing and sales volume potential, and why that's important. And it's important to understand the concept of what margins you're selling your services or your product for, and making money on that. That's something that you can find yourself, if you don't have a clear idea of your costs and you find yourself pricing yourself into bankruptcy, essentially, it can be a very unpleasant experience. And I will probably share a story or two from my own my own career where I've encountered that type of thing. And then we're going to talk about the various strategies, everything from the packaging and image of what you're trying to create and why that should help support all the other aspects that you've gone through, the exercise of defining your markets and what your products and where it fits in the marketplace, about your distribution, how you're delivering your product, whether it's directly in a location, whether it's through distributorships, whether it's partnering with another company that will take advantage, will make use of your product and be able to sell it through them. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that, and then various promotional strategies, everything from digital strategies, which is becoming more and more important, and especially it's accelerated with the onset of the pandemic and everyone being in restricted access to being able to get out there. The digital communication strategies have become more and more critical to moving a company forward. And then we'll talk a little bit about PR and advertising. And the interesting piece now is the overlay between the digital strategies and the PR advertising components. There's so much of it is now directly related. It was moving that way anyway, but the last 2 years where it disrupted everybody's normal channels of how they got together and how they work together. That's really become more important than ever, I guess. So let's go first with talking about defining your business or services. And this is, a lot of this is a is really being honest, brutally honest with yourself. You want to really define what your products and services are about. You want to really define what you find important about what you're doing, why it's fulfilling, what is it that you think that it makes sense that you should be putting out in the marketplace. You should also be thinking about if there's any new products or services planned from what you're initially doing now. And that might include extensions of current offerings or new, or how that may impact the focus of your business going forward. And give you a story, a little quick story from my past, and you'll see how I'm old enough to know this because I lived it. Back in the beer business days when light beer was first being introduced, there was a great discussion and great debate within the beer companies about whether they were going to put their light beer out there as a line extension of their main brands, or whether they're going to create a whole separate product that was owned by them but was not necessarily directly named after their product. So Miller Lite came out there, and so everyone saw that, and they became very popular very fast, and all the beer companies were scrambling, trying to figure out how to go about it. And folks like Anheuser-Busch with Budweiser and Coors with their Coors brand debated whether do they create a line extension like a Bud Light or a Coors Light, which if obviously today all those exist. But at the time, Anheuser-Busch decided not to go that way. They felt that it would compromise the Budweiser brand, and that it would, people that have a certain expectation for what Budweiser stood for, having a Bud Light would be the wrong thing. So they created Natural Light, was the product that they developed, which you're not really clear how that related, but it was, other than it was a light beer. Well, Miller proceeded to clean the clock of all these other folks that were afraid to go into a line extension, forcing people like Coors and Budweiser to create their own Bud Light and Coors Light. And the irony of all that is those light beer extensions actually became bigger sellers than the main flagship brand. So Bud Light surpassed Budweiser, which no one ever conceived as a possibility. Coors Light became wildly popular across the country, and Miller Lite to this day has established itself as really the primary brand of that brewer. And all that was because of the demand from the marketplace and depended on how they reacted to it. So that's, it gets into some of that whole thinking about, you have to be clear in your head about what is it that you want to do, but also be listening to the marketplace, because that's an important piece of what will drive how you position your product. Now, when you talk about products, there are two issues that sometimes get confused. People talk about it a lot, but sometimes they seem to overlap in the idea of features versus benefits. Features are the characteristics of the product or service that attract people, and the benefits are, what are the benefits to those features bring? What are the benefits of those characteristics to the product? Just to stay with my beer story, is Miller Lite created a whole advertising campaign that debated what the benefits were on the feature of being a lower calorie, lighter beer. And that was the whole taste great, less filling debate that they made into an amusing concept. But that was really a debate about the features. And the reality of what that was, and what was not mentioned and a lot of people didn't realize, less filling and lower calories meant less alcohol as well. And so that was never really pushed very hard until much later, and even then it was never really focused on. And the concept of it being a diet beer, that was a big concern, but no, it's really the idea of it being lighter, and you can drink more of them in a hot day without getting too inebriated. So that became a benefit, and a lot of that were things that they backed into. What's interesting now, that even extends to today, you may have seen, anyone that watched any of the basketball games or any sports events lately, Anheuser-Busch created the brand of the Michelob Ultra, which they're positioning as a lighter beer for those that are active in exercise or sports, that you can do that and take care of your body, but still enjoy a beer or two. But one of the complaints about Michelob Ultra is that it tastes pretty bad, or pretty bland at least. And one of the latest commercials that you'll see for Miller Lite is the guy buying, I'm going to buy some beer, and all the signage everywhere is saying Miller Lite is only one more calorie than Michelob Ultra. So you don't have to give up the taste, essentially, in order to get the benefit of having the less alcohol and less calories, and easy and good for you, or better for you than a heavier beer. And all these are, different aspects, but we're talking millions of dollars are spent on the thinking and positioning that goes into each of these things. And it extends down to the smaller products, smaller market products, and the whole idea of the craft brewers that have come since then. And we can get into that if anyone really gets interested in that. Seasonality is another component that needs to be looked at. Is it different parts of the year, different times of the year going to be more, I guess, more pleasing for your customers, more likely that they'll buy, and they're going to buy more or less of your product or your service. So that gets into it. And then other future growth plans you may have as you go through. So again, a lot of this is spade work that you do beforehand, and going through these exercises helps give you some perspective on going forward and how you're going to what kind of market strategies you're going to use. After you really are talking about the product itself, you then want to get into looking at who your target customers are, because that becomes an essential piece of what your marketing strategies are going to be. And you may have more than one target customer. It may fit, you may have different segments. And it's important to go through the exercise with each segment that you have. And that includes describing your targets in terms of size, location, characteristics, who is currently buying or most likely to buy your product, just all the other aspects of the potential market. And as I say, you do it for each segment. And for greatest success, you really want to do is look at, focus your marketing efforts on the individuals or organizations that are your best customers. And that seems, again, self-evident, but sometimes people don't think of it that way. And when you do it, it may provide you some insight as to where to best focus your promotional materials. I seem to be stuck on beer today, but a brand that suffered but benefited from this kind of segmentation was the original Michelob brands. And those of you that are old enough to know, they had actually Michelob Light, and Michelob Dark before they ever came up with Ultra. And the problem with that, the product was conceived as higher than a regular beer, so a better quality than a Budweiser or a Miller or Coors or anything else, using imported ingredients and brewed in a certain way that made it more desirable. But again, this was before the craft brewery phase, so that it was kind of stuck in a no man's land when craft beer was introduced. But before that, their focus was that this was the brand, this is the product you would use if you go to the country club and you're golfing and you want to have a high-end beverage. There was a beer, and that would be a Michelob. That's why they had the different shaped bottles. And it had a different aspect to it. Again, all that kind of ended up being in no man's land because the pricing was a little different, but it wasn't large enough to be distinctive. The promotional activities that focused on promoting certain musical acts that were considered more of a higher end, semi-sophisticated type of an act. Again, none of that really stayed with it and wasn't strong enough to drive the brand. To the day, Michelob's always just been turned, I believe it's on, I don't know if they even offer the other types of Michelob anymore, but Ultra is the focus that it is. So as you go through and defining and painting this picture of your best customer, it includes everything from their age, their sex, so whether it's your product or services are impacted by either a male or female audience, where people live or work, what their income and lifestyles are about, their interests, their beliefs, all of those things impact and come into how you define your product. You also want to look at the size of the what your market is. When you're looking at painting that picture, by the way, one of the best ways to do it, I mean, the large companies will go into market research and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on market research. Having been the beneficiary of conducting that kind of and having those resources, it can be quite amazing the amount of detail of information they get. But if you're a small business and you're trying to understand who your best customers and why they are purchasing, what are the things that your product or services, what speaks to them, you can spend time just having those kind of almost informal conversations with some of your best customers, and they're the ones that are going to give you the best insights. And sometimes you can sit there and convince yourself of a certain way of looking at looking at your product, looking at why people are buying it. But if you spend your time talking to the potential customers and why they're doing it, that often will open up their thinking and new insights for you as to why they're doing what they're doing. And I kind of almost call this marketing on a shoestring, but it's a market research on a shoestring, but it's really an important thing to do, is always look for feedback from various sources that can be helpful to you. Then looking at your size of your market, including frequency of purchase, how much is being spent each time someone's purchasing your product or service, whether it's a growing or shrinking market. And then what's the possibility of future expansion? Now, one of the things that occurred because of the pandemic, there has been a kind of big shift in how companies were both, and a lot of it was survival based, whether they promoted themselves based on whether PR or marketing or digital aspects of things. And then when if they were in retail stores, a number of stores that were closed and spent months not operating, and they needed to find ways to create customers, people became very creative and innovative of how they approached it. I'll use myself as an example of this, is that I tend to like higher end coffees. I used to spend a lot of time in various coffee shops, and I like to promote local coffee makers in terms of the brands and such. During the pandemic, obviously I wasn't going out. There were no coffee shops open, and actually getting high-end coffee became at least something that you had to think about, because you're going to make it at home, and how are you going to get it? Well, it turned out there's a brand that's based out of Milwaukee, where my son lives, and I frequented there. I found that their coffee was very good, and they have 18 or so different varieties and types of beans and roasts and such, called Stone Creek Coffee. And because I had talked to them, I had purchased some things there, they had my digital information, they had my email, and they were able to contact me. Well, they were closed like everyone else during the quarantine times, but they sent out these emails promoting that if you purchased a certain amount of coffee, and they would send it to you with no charges for shipping. And the pricing was the same as if you were walking in the store and buying a bag of beans or ground or not. And it became a very interesting way to go about it. And it broke up my day to actually every few weeks I'm going to have to pick out enough coffee and types of brands, and they would have seasonal differences. It became a little engagement thing, and I'm very loyal to this brand at this point because of their ability to do that, to reach me on a digital basis. And it was because I was a customer at one time, and they had recorded and captured my contact information, that they've were able to both promote it to me, and that to this day I still am buying Stone Creek coffee, which is quite good. I will put a little plug in for them. So it's a very a lot of things were disrupted and a lot of things have changed, and people are very much, depending on the type of product you're working with, that they're very open to direct contact, and the digital strategies can become more and more essential to being successful. So now, let's talk a little bit about the value proposition of what you're doing. And this is going to include some competitive analysis, which I've always found both intriguing and very helpful for whatever product or service I'm doing. Is I always want to know what all my competitors are up to. And it's amazing the kind of insights that you can find. Some people have accused me of just being a gossip monger, but that's not true. I just truly like to get to know what everyone's doing and why. So you sit there and you've defined a lot about what it is about your product or service that you think is unique. Why is it your product different than your competitor down the street? And part of that gets into, your own biases and opinions, which is fine. But it is, when you spend the time looking at your competitors in depth, you start to look at what's their pricing strategies. What are their promotional strategies? Are they going out to the marketplace with various ways of getting attention to themselves, bringing attention to themselves? Do they have a different distribution strategy than you might have contemplated? Does it make sense to look at some things that they've done right and emulate them? Does it make sense to look at some of the things they've done wrong and avoid them? And that becomes part of the research that helps you then form what you feel is your value proposition, why your product, your service is different and better than the alternative. And whether it's becomes a pricing difference, whether it becomes a quality difference, whether it becomes a service and responsiveness difference, all those fit into it. Then you look at each segment. You should be able to define a unique selling aspect to that segment. And I'll use a law firm, I guess, analogy, a story. When I started working with law firms were large, but not anywhere near as large as they've gotten to this day. And they were much more limited into what markets they were in. And part of the reason for that was because the lawyers were concentrated, and there's no way to communicate with lawyers in other offices and other markets except through fax, phone, and FedEx. And if you were working on a project, the delay in getting information back and forth, it really undermined the ability to work together and jointly produce services or a product for a particular service, a particular client. When the internet really became essential and email became the way of communication, and then you started trading documents back and forth, and that you could have a group of people in 5 or 6 different jurisdictions simultaneously working on the same project and trading insights and information, it suddenly opened the floodgates for the consolidation of this industry. So law firms across the country are merging, some merging out of existence. No matter, old line firms were the ones that were going to be the staying power, and they could show this history of client relationships that went back over a century. And Dickinson Wright, where I currently am, has that kind of a tradition. But we've expanded to the point I have 19 offices across North America, including a very significant office in Toronto. And my various practice areas and industry groups that we focus on has been multiplied, obviously, by quite a bit, just because we have this different ability to reach each other. And part of the reason that that's important is the clients that we have. Every business has become more global, and a need for greater ability to work with different resources, and they can't all be contained in the same geography. And we're in the professional services side, and so a lot of times services, you're seeing another revolution of where people are working from home in this hybrid working environment, because it's found that you can now work. We were all forced to do it quickly. Everyone denied it could be done, but suddenly within 2 weeks, suddenly everyone was working from home. So now you have people working in, you might not even have an office and have access to talent and or resources that you never could have before. And that's happening both from the standpoint of that's your business and you're accessing, being able to provide certain insights and talent, but also from the standpoint if you're providing that talent yourself and you are part of that whole aspect of just that you're able to do work with somebody even though you are half a country away from them or a different state. And so there's a lot of that goes on. Also, there's the international aspect of business as it's grown. And we happen to be here in Michigan with a very large automotive segment, which has continued to become more and more international. And as a result of that, it's important that we have, when I'm providing services, I need to be able to access these kind of international insights and knowledge and ability to work with folks from all over the world. And a lot of that is done because of the technology that exists today. So those are the kinds of things that can happen and why that becomes a interesting value proposition. And how you utilize those tools can again be part of how you define your product and how you'll reach your customer. All right, talk a little bit about pricing and sales volume, just to have an understanding of how that might impact things. Pricing and your positioning of your product or service, they go hand in hand. Now, some that may seem self-evident, but it's interesting how often people may overlook that. If you are positioning your product as in a very exclusive, high-end type of a product, the cost structure may impact or may influence some of what you decide your pricing will be, but it may be more as much influenced by where it fits in the marketplace compared to other competitors. And I'll come back to that in a minute, talk a little bit about that with various brands. Now, with the pricing, it really impacts your cost and margin considerations. So you know what your cost is. So if you have a product that costs a certain amount to produce, what you sell for, the difference is your margin, and that it's important to understand what sales volume do you need? How much of that do you need to sell in order to break even, whether on a weekly or monthly basis? And because obviously, if you're not selling it at a high enough price, you're not making enough margin, it's difficult for the business to survive. One of my first jobs, worked for a small regional brewer down in New Orleans, and we had our financial systems were very much in disarray, and we were doing a lot of guessing as to what costs were. And one of the things, of course, the man I worked for was a great marketer and promoter, and he decided that we could sell a lot of beer for selling it 3 for $1. And he was right. We moved a lot of volume. The thing was that we realized it was actually costing us more than $1 to produce 3 beers. It would probably cost us about $1.25. So I'm losing 25 cents on every time I'm selling 3 for $1. Well, that started to come home to roost once we realized that, and it cost. But we had to negotiate our way with our can supplier, because they eventually loaned me, without knowing it, $1 million, and I had no way to pay them back. And they were this is the difference in how information is available today. Back then, there were very little personal computers. There was no internet. Everything was done, again, fax, phone, and FedEx. And it wasn't until it reached $1 million that they even noticed that I was Now we weren't paying as much as we were buying. So that became a very, very interesting experience, life experience. But they had no interest in taking over our company. I offered. So instead, they let us continue to operate, and we only paid cash on delivery, which was fine because then we raised our pricing to two for $1, and we did pretty well. In terms of how that might get into your sales volume, again, you need to understand what is your potential volume and how do you get there. And again, this is using various groups, and well, the first way to look at it is through the internet. Or is there ways to research how large your market is, or how much a competitor is able to sell of their type of work? This is why it's important to belong to groups like the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. This is where you are able to talk to other business owners and chamber staff that might have insights into how you can predict the size of your market. And then there's various small business focused associations and resources. In Michigan here, there's a couple that are really useful. The Oakland County, for example, has a one-stop shop at no cost to you. It's already being paid for by taxes. That as a small business, if you're located in Oakland County, you're able to go to access them, and they have a lot of information and workshops on all these various aspects of running your business. Again, they also would have aspects on how to project what your market size is and whether it's growing or shrinking. The state of Michigan has a small business resource center. Again, that's no cost, and that becomes an important resource for you. Then the other pieces that you want to benchmark against your competition. Once you're operating, you're still always looking at what your competitors are doing, and you want to see how is it that my product is doing. How are my sales doing compared to where what my competitors are? Are they in different markets or different access points? Have they been able to grow in a way that I never even saw coming, and that they're able to get into that? So you're constantly reassessing where you fit into the whole thing. I'm just saying. Yes, there's a nice chat from Dave Perry about if you lose money on everything you sell, you will never make it up with volume. And that is so true. And it seems so self-evident, but it's amazing how you can delude yourself thinking, well, I just need to sell more of it, and then we'll be better off. So that's not something that happens very easy. Hard lessons to learn, and we're sophisticated people, business people, but it's amazing the things that you sometimes don't realize. Now I want to get a little bit into, just as we've kind of gone through and laid the groundwork. You understand your business. You've done some self-assessment, your products, your services, who your markets and your customers are, what your competition looks like. Now let's go look at specific strategies that we might want to. And this is going to be again a handout that will come after the presentation as a follow-up or just as a add-on. But we'll go through the basic areas that it covers, and just again a checklist for things that you can look at. One is your packaging, your image, the marketing materials that you have. I mean, it's important to have consistency, and that whatever that image is and whatever that packaging is, so whether it's your business card, whether it's a product itself, whether it's your website, all of it should look consistent, and all of it should look like it works together, because that kind of cohesion helps you define the marketplace and have a stronger position there. And part of that is, what image will you convey? Is your other brochures and marketing material any advertising, even the location and the decor of where, if you're doing a business that you have a physical presence, they all support the similar theme and similar way of going about things. And are they consistent with to the market that you're trying to serve? And then are there unique aspects to your packaging if you're doing a product that will benefit, that provides a benefit to consumers, whether it's an easy open type thing, a self-storage, an easy ship. There's various aspects of that become an important part of it. And then now you get into distribution. How your customers will buy from you. Will they be able to purchase from your website? And again, after, I think one of the lessons that came out of this past, the pandemic, was that people are more comfortable than ever purchasing things from websites. And do you want to be more than just a standalone informational page? Then what other methods will you use to get products to your customer or services to your customer? Are you going to partner with other organizations? Are you going to partner with another service that is complementary that you can offer and to jointly work with someone? And then you have, what are the other requirements that might be important for each distribution method? And then you have that includes any requirements for other intermediaries. And what are the distribution costs to your company? There's whole businesses now that have been formed working with Amazon, for example, that basically they've created a whole series of products that they work with Amazon that they supply, and becomes almost a small business incubator for certain types of products. Now, Amazon, being the behemoth they are, recognizes their advantage and have in many ways they've been reeling back some of the advantages of their distribution and promotional cycle, but promoting it through an Amazon website often will get your product listed fairly high when people are doing searches. Of course, that's one of the challenges they're facing in the courts, where they're claiming that Amazon is promoting their products first, more so than the people they're working with. So it becomes you have to always pay attention to how things are changing, how the marketplace shifts. We look at promotion, various ways of promoting your product. Again, whether it's something through word of mouth, whether it's through product sampling, whether it's through promoting by being part of an event that your product or service is going to be featured. All that gets into various strategies depending on what fits best for your product. The advertising can be something it can be expensive, obviously, but it can also be something that's more cost effective. Than it might be maybe some type of flyer or print advertising. Maybe it's some kind of limited video type thing that's done through the internet. That's one of the things that the internet technology now provides, is an ability to create ways, and video is getting one very cheap to produce, and it's becoming it is a way that people access information in a very positive manner, and that they can use that to create this niche and help really raise the profile of what you're selling. Then you also get into public relations. And again, that's something that in the past was limited to, did you have to have a professional work with you to do public relations and to get the word out to the media and others related to what you are selling or to your services? Well, nowadays the media has lost so many people, and they're trying to survive on their own. Often aspects of things like doing blogs and video newsletters or online newsletters are ways to provide information. If you can create it and package it in a way that it'll attract the media, that's how they find new products and companies to feature. They're always looking for these kinds of insights. And if you make it easy for them, that you can suddenly get a lot more attention than maybe your current size or reach would really warrant, but you have an attractive story, and that's what it gets into, is storytelling. And if you have an attractive story, the media loves that. And there's so much online media now that a lot of that will get into mainstream ways that you could never touch in the past. So these are all things to think about. And that really gets back into your whole digital part of it, which is social media and how you put things out there, your website, and obviously things related to that, including any related blogs and such, and a million other ways that I'm not the best person. I turn to my younger colleagues that are more up to speed on the digital world, but that has become more and more effective way to promote yourself. And so I mentioned there's other resources like the Hispanic Chamber, Oakland County One Stop Shop, State of Michigan, and then also groups like the Marketing and Sales Executives of Detroit, where that I sit on the board of and have been involved with for several years. It's a great, these are also great networking organizations where you meet people that can help you, and maybe not directly because they're a customer, but they help you because they provide insights and ideas about your business, or you have relationships that are going to come in handy down the road. And I definitely support and really advocate for all of those as well. So with that, I guess I didn't get a lot of questions, but if there are any, I'm happy to take them, or any other discussions. And here's my contact information. I'm also happy to follow up and talk with folks if they have an interest on an individual basis. Just I enjoy working with people. I spend a lot of time coaching lawyers on how to best approach clients, because that's not something they were trained to do, and how to think about going about serving different market segments.
So Joe, I actually have a question about that. So how did you find kind of pivoting your thought process from doing marketing for a product, when you worked with the beer companies, to now, promoting and marketing a service? So those are such different fields. That how did you really kind of change your mindset from one to the other?
Well, it's interestingly enough, they are very different fields, but when you break it down, they actually have a lot of overlap. And what you find is that, at least what I found, was that for consumer products, so the beer industry, soft drink industry, any kind of consumer product like that, they have built and become very sophisticated in terms of how they operate. And when I worked at Anheuser-Busch, they had an entire floor of MBAs from the top business schools in the country. And what we would do is we were just, people were cheap as far as they were concerned, and they wanted the talent, and they threw it at every project we did, which drives your cost crazy. When I first got into professional services, before I worked for lawyers, I worked with architects. And the thing that attracted me was that you had responsibility for the entire marketing mix, from defining what your market was about, as being an entrepreneur for the marketing side of it, defining what your market was, who were our target clients, how do we go about it, and putting the promotional materials together, how do we pitch work, how do we get those contacts that we reach. And so you find yourselves doing the same thing. Sometimes, though, being an entrepreneur and or with services, you're able to do a broader reach of this than you could have if you're doing a more established consumer product. So what it broke down into is that they're different, but not really. So if you apply the same principles, it tends to actually work well. And I spent a lot of time talking with lawyers to say, all right, let's understand better. What are the clients? Why are they looking for someone? Why are they looking for the kind of service that they right now they're asking us either to permit to do a pitch for, or is that that there might be something they see coming. What is it that we're going to solve for them? And they don't want to hear about the legal, all the legal details. That's not what you're selling. You're selling your relationship and your insight into their business, and that's what you really are putting yourself into. So it gets along like that.
So we do have a question from Anne as well.
Okay.
Once you have your marketing plan in place, how often do you review?
I think that it's part of this is, especially for small business entrepreneurial, you're reviewing it constantly. I mean, you're experimenting. You put your marketing plan in place and you're working it, but you're constantly evaluating. Is this really working? And now part of it is you have to give yourself the patience to see if the things are going to work out. Sometimes they don't immediately, and you have to see, and you have to make sure you have the staying power to do it. But I think that you're doing it on a fairly ongoing basis, but you're also then doing a maybe a major overhaul review every 6 months or a year for sure. Are there other?
Have any questions? I think that just means you were very thorough.
I guess. I hope I didn't bore people to death. I'm bored with it because I've been doing it for the last 2 days. I've been practicing. I'm like, okay. But no, as I say, I'm more than happy to if someone wants to chat at some point, just put some more specifics and less just theory on it. But it's what it really is, a frame of mind, and I think that's the key piece that's important to do. That you have to have that. If you have that perspective and you train yourself to think that way, it sometimes drives my wife a little crazy. But I look at everything. I can't watch TV without suddenly checking off. Wow, what's the market position? What are they trying to do? Who are they trying to reach? Why, that's a really bad way to go about it. Who did any research on that? I mean, you just find yourself just going mentally through those kinds of checklists. But that's also the fun of it. I mean, it really is. It touches every aspect. I think it touches every aspect of day-to-day living, because it impacts for-profit business, nonprofit. It impacts volunteer roles, because usually you're trying to figure out, well, how do we get more members to something? How to get more participation? All these kinds of things really follow the same types of principles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But just for everybody's information, we do have we will be sending this out, the presentation out, as well as a checklist, a marketing checklist for you to go through, along with Joe's contact information and the recording from today. So, and we also have a couple more things. Let me put this up real quick.
There you go.
So did also want to share, so our next session is going to be April 4th, and it's going to be one of the things that Joe brought up was telling your story. If you have an attractive story, storytelling is the way to go, and brought up social media. So that is actually our next segment, April 4th at noon. The event page is already up, so I will send out the link to that as well. So if anybody has any questions or needs any other information, please let us know. So yeah, this is very exciting. Again, Joe, thank you so much for
my pleasure,
participating. And if anybody wants to ask Joe any other questions, you can also send them over to me, and I can kind of pass them along and connect you all. And I will be putting the LinkedIn as well. So yeah, and right now we are right on time. So
perfect.
Yes. So thank you everybody so much for participating. Thank you, and we're all set. So
thanks everyone. Take care.
You as well. Have a great day. Thank you.